Welcome. This session is part of the Treasury 101 On Demand training series for the ACT Middle East Treasury Summit. And today we're going to be focusing on working capital management strategy from a Treasury perspective. My name is Brian Shanahan. I'll be facilitating this session. I'm the founder of both Informata and TermsCheck.com. And personally, I've been doing working capital now for nearly 28 years. But anyway, less about me. Just a note, obviously we're recording this session. It's available throughout the summit and for another 14 days afterwards. And by all means, feel free to get engaged on social media. If you do use Twitter, you can use the handle at ACT Update or tweet with the hashtag ACTA AC21. Yeah. Anyway, without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. Princey, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Brian. Really excited to be here at another ACT. Hope we can all meet in person the next time. Just to introduce myself, Princey Royce. I'm the Regional Treasury Manager for Middle East and India for NOV. And I've been with NOV for over 8 years and very close to Treasury is my passion, and I've always been in Treasury, most of my time in banking and Treasury, in fact, and hope to have a wonderful discussion today.
And Osman.
Hi everyone, this is Osman, my second session with ACT. A little bit of background. I'm actually a financial auditor, so not the right person to be in this session, but fortunately I switched to Treasury after my KPMG days. And currently I'm working as head of finance and tax, but we do not have a separate department for treasury management. So I handle the treasury all by myself with a couple of team members. And yeah, this is all about me. Looking forward to a healthy discussion now.
Thank you both. Well, I think three broad points I think we want to try and focus on in these 30 minutes. When we talk about working capital strategy from a treasury perspective. An obvious one is around funding, yeah. A second one is around measurement, yeah. And a third one then is what I'll generally call awareness, the non-financial community. But if we start off with the funding thing, because we want to try and focus on things that have happened in the last 12, 18 months as we've gone through or are going through, depending on where you are in the world, this terrible pandemic. But I know, Osman, you've got a pretty deep story about what you were doing about funding and also reducing debt. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it has been a very challenging time lately. What happened with us was, as you are well aware of the fact, we were, generally speaking, all the oil and gas industry was struggling. But for us, the major struggle was to make sure that we have funds available without increasing our borrowing cost. We could easily move to typical funding channels, increasing our payables, for example, discounting our receivables and all of that. But we wanted to come up with something which does not have a major impact on the company in terms of finance cost. So what we did was we converted the investor's loan to equity. This is something which I have never seen in my life throughout, which I have never done before. But I will not be quoting the numbers here. I'll try to keep them confidential, but we managed to convert around 78% of our debt to equity. So the question is, how did it give us the relief in terms of working capital? Whatever was due to be paid to the investors in the coming 18 months, we managed to convert it into equity. So that gave us some breathing space in terms of cash outflows in the next 18 months. This was the first thing which we started, but to be honest, this was the last thing we did. In between, we did the normal things, increasing the payable days, finding the financial institutions where we could extend our payable days, discounting the receivables, all of that stuff. It cannot go out of the picture, but we try to keep it to the minimum level. And we try to play a big shot as we call in cricketing terms, we played the big shot by delaying our debt repayment by 18 months without increasing any borrowing cost in the P&L. This was the only thing which saved us, to be honest. Otherwise, we would have been in deeper and deeper trouble.
It's very interesting what you say, Osman, because my experience in the Middle East over time, not over the last 18 months, is that everything is very dependent on the oil price, and of course, oil has been quite low in recent years. And that creates like a domino effect down for everybody, depending on who the ultimate customer is. And whether they're locally funded through oil money or funded elsewhere, foreign-wise, from non-oil money, can make a huge difference. I wonder, Princey, because NOV operate right across the region, and in terms of things like debt collection and things like that. I mean, sometimes, and I know it depends very much on the specific territory you can be operating in. That can be a real headache sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a perspective of working capital in the region on a broader sense, I read a report by PwC ME stating that the average working capital performance for companies in the region in 2020 have fallen by about 157 days. So to put that into perspective, that's about $10 billion of cash tied up in operations by listed companies across the regions. And of course, it runs in tens and millions for larger conglomerates. So, this is a very common problem, especially in the last 2 years. And for NOV, fortunately, we embarked on a working capital improvement program back in 2018. And of course, it was more aggressively pursued in the last 2 years with us focusing. It was a program that regionally I focused on beyond collections. Actually, collections, we have a separate initiative with the shared service centers, but beyond the DSO, if you look at the other components, of course, it's your inventory and your payables. So the challenge with both of them, of course, is the data, right? So we managed to have create a software organization-wide. It's not only ME, but we kind of piloted it where we could track our inventory across locations and match between the needs and the availability of different regions in terms of inventory. So reducing inventory across the board, the days across the board, release a lot of cash in one entity, which helped save it from funding from the other, and so on. Of course, that was a ripple effect. So that's a dashboard that kind of goes out as a management report saying that, this is what's blocking your cash in the region, and, can you find it a new home? And we get requests from across other parts of the world as well, saying that this is absolutely required in this particular region. And if you don't require it in the Middle East, you can transfer it over. And it kind of helped because we never had this kind of matching internally before. Of course, that, how we're across the world in 66 countries. So, it was a very good tool, and it's a simple tool, it's simple dashboard, but kind of worked quite well in the last 1 year. We're still tracking progress on it, as in we're trying to put metrics on what we've saved, the usage, and so on, of course. And the other point was, of course, aggregation of vendors and supplies across the region to bring down to kind of extend payable terms and negotiate it across the board to understand common vendors and negotiate some savings in terms of, you have 5 vendors supplying the same services in one office, whereas you can have one vendor supply 10 other services and combine it with a cost reduction and more efficient in terms of contact and so on. So those are some initiatives as part of the overall working capital improvement that we've done in the past 2 years.
It's very interesting what you say, Princey, because obviously I've been a long time in this particular business, and measurement is always a huge problem, and I think many outsiders, they kind of assume, well, surely this must be easy because we all have all these systems and stuff, and just hit the big red button and all the numbers come out, don't they? And it's actually, I mean, I think the number of large companies that I know that simply have one system, very, very few. They're out there, but there's very, very few of them. which of course then means, well, if you're talking about, say, measuring how much inventory you've got, yeah, it's not just having the dashboards in place, which is important, but then knowing that what goes into the dashboard, yeah, is equivalent from one entity to the next entity, where they can think that they're putting all the same stuff in, but actually maybe they're not. And that can be terribly confusing. I don't know if you've come across this, Osman, in your company, yeah?
Yeah. See, measurement has always been a big challenge for us, because the way we operate is our offshore sites are equipped with some different systems, and our head office has a unique system. Integration has always been a problem, and I always face challenges where the measurement is not correctly done. But there is another side to the coin. We did not actually have to focus to reduce our inventory, for example. It got automatically reduced with the lockdowns. Nothing was reaching to the site and everything was getting consumed there. So our payables were not increasing. So automatically my inventory was going down. There were no further purchases. My payables were reducing over time. And then in between, we created a bridge with the financial institution to delay our payments. So it is not all so dark. Certain things automatically improved our situation. So fortunately, we tried to measure accurately, and we tried to find more funds, of course. But on the other side, in the background, there were certain dynamics which were automatically helping us to achieve our target. Offshore sites, a few kilometers inside the sea, nobody could go there, nobody could deliver anything. Ports were blocked, and automatically we started reducing. So my efficient inventory level automatically reduced to a certain level, which was quite acceptable to me. So there was no challenge from that point of view.
It's very interesting you say that, Osman. Sorry, I just remembered a conversation I had about 3 weeks ago with a construction company in Lebanon, yeah, who have no working capital problem, of course, because the whole economy's just stopped, yeah, which is not really what you want. But it's an extreme, shall we say, it's a very extreme version of how to manage working capital, you know, which I wouldn't recommend anybody. Yeah. But also, the conversations that I'm hearing in the Middle East at the moment is that, the oil price is coming back up, so that's good news, generally speaking. But then there's all these supply chain bottlenecks, because there's so much that's imported from India and the Far East and so on, and everything that you mentioned with, kind of blockages in ports and all this kind of stuff. So how do you say, the working capital issues are not so much financial issues at the moment. They're operational issues, that if people can't get their hands on a particular product, well, then maybe they don't have the spare parts to fix that well, or something like that. Or if you're saying a retail business, they don't have the goods to actually put on the shelf to sell to the consumer. Yeah. And this is now the kind of the post-pandemic problem, is all these issues around, particularly around shipping and container costs and etc., going to have their knock-on effect into the local economies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this is true. We will definitely see some pressure on the P&L because of the higher container costs and everything. And I link it back to what is happening with China. Anything coming out of China, or if you are importing something from China, it is not possible at the moment. Most of the things. And if you, for example, in Middle East, how we are working now, if we have a choice between China and Europe, currently we prefer Europe as a territory to purchase, because the prices are much lower than what we would get from China. And the huge difference is only because of logistics. Yeah. So in the next year budget, I'm anticipating some pressure on profit because of logistics charges. But I'm happy to wait until then, because despite the increasing oil prices, we are still not getting paid. So I would wait until the time when I have inflow of funds, then it's okay. We will manage the profit and loss, which is fine. But it's still a good news for me that all these logistics problems are making our lives slightly easier.
And Princey, I imagine you probably have an issue with this, because your operational crews are almost everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere imaginable, that you can think of, even when there's no roads or nothing. Yeah. This, in a best possible situation, logistics in your industry is extremely difficult. Yeah. But I wonder how this is, potentially exacerbating issues that your industry has naturally anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I think speaking for the region, I think the nationalist agendas of localization have been building on for a while, especially in Saudi and in some part in Abu Dhabi and so on, which has actually encouraged us to sort of set up larger manufacturing bases in Saudi Arabia and in Abu Dhabi, because that's typically what the government wants you to do. And Iqama, for example, in Saudi, the ICTIVA in Saudi is one such movement. And our critical partner, of course, is Aramco. And if you want to deal with Aramco, you've got to be, on the ICTIVA compliance side to do business in Saudi. So it's kind of helped. We probably found it difficult initially about 5 years ago to kind of, set base in Saudi, do manufacturing, work well that, we import from various parts of the world and, assembled it here and the rigs and so on. But so as we speak, we've got a joint venture with Aramco in Saudi Arabia for a rig manufacturing facility, which is first in the region. It's going to service the entire MENA region and fully 100% manufactured in Saudi. We've got fabrication, service, repair, everything in place. So, well, did we foresee all these supply chain and logistics issues? I don't know. But on the other side, the localization agendas have kind of helped. Like Usman said, it's kind of worked in our favor this time. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been having conversations with other people in the region, in Saudi, in UAE, in Qatar, places like this, where that kind of localization agenda was being driven for other reasons. Yeah, but then when you introduce the idea that a container load of something now from China costs $10,000 to get here, yeah, suddenly the cost differential of what was before and now has just turned upside down. Yeah. So what seemed like, what could be very uneconomic as local manufacture now actually is very economic compared to the traditional kind of import route. But of course, what I'm finding is that it's placing particular constraints on many supply organizations, because when they've thought about kind of the engineering part of building the manufacture part, yeah. But then they haven't necessarily thought about how do I manage inventories and how often do I order, and what are my batch sizes that are coming in from wherever they do, and this and so on. Yeah, I mean, to give an example, I was talking to one crowd who make windows. Yeah, and previously they imported everything. Yeah. And now they're actually assembling all this stuff themselves, but of course that means that they need to buy all the various parts from wherever they come from. It's something they've never done before, and quite frankly, they're struggling with managing the inventory, yeah, and then managing the cash flow to pay for the inventory when they need to. So there's a whole bunch of brand new experiences, which I think mean that working capital in general is becoming a much more important subject in the Middle East. And much more complex in the way it needs to be managed versus we were having this conversation 5 or 10 years ago. But it does kind of the other problem that you have in all organizations all over the world is what I call working capital awareness, and particularly the non-financial people. Because most finance people, and certainly if you have a treasury exposure, you understand that cash is king. No one needs to really tell you that. It's kind of in your blood. But it's when it's the non-financial people, and I always wonder, especially in regions of the world where this is a subject that's, how do you say, growing in importance rather than it's at a kind of mature stage. Yeah. Then what are the behaviors that you see in the front line of either people becoming aware of this subject, or quite frankly operating with blissful ignorance that they don't really kind of get it yet. Yeah. Princey, I wonder what kind of things you've been seeing.
Yeah, happy to kind of give up my thoughts on that, because personally gone through this, and what we realize is working capital previously was a finance agenda. So it was happening in a silo, right? So what what we term as transformation initiatives in the region, working capital being one of them, we've created cross-departmental squads, which can actually have team members from any department, not only finance. It could be operations, it could be sales, it could be procurement, and we've got all our thinking caps on for a particular problem because it touches each of our departments. So it's wrongful to kind of think it's only a finance or a treasury issue. So that itself kind of helped to spread awareness deeper into the departments from the middle levels. So, and then of course they had their KPIs and their metrics and everything, and this is being managed. But and then when we actually spoke to their bosses or to the general management in the operations and sales teams, we tried to articulate the impact in overall liquidity. So rather than telling them that, your days and inventory is 100 days, we need it down by 90 days, was like, what we conveyed was a day saving in DIO would add back $4 million to cash. That's available for your overall liquidity, your operational agility. It affects you. So that kind of strikes you rather than giving them plain figures or telling them what you're trying to do. And additionally, as a company, we've also have introduced a working capital component in the bonus plan. So, if there's X amount of improvement, you're going to get a benefit of it in your bonus. So I think everyone then definitely understands what working capital improvements are required, right? And everyone's all hands on board. So I think these were effective measures internally.
And Usman, what's been your experience of this?
Yeah. See, before talking about non-financial people, I would focus on one point. In many companies, I have noticed the treasury head or the person responsible for treasury management. Normally, that person is also generally not so aware of what happens other than cash inflow and outflow. I'll give you an example. For example, when I was looking at different ways to improve my liquidity, straight away, I filed some appeals in Europe to delay my millions of euros of tax to next year. There was a provision available where we could use that provision and delay our payout. So just imagine a person who does not have an insight on taxation system would have probably not come up with this idea. Mm-hmm. So first of all, it is very important how I see now companies are putting the people in treasury who are aware of, who are more like jack of all trades. They are not king of treasuries, they are jack of all trades. So this is how they manage everything in a smoother and more efficient way. Now, the second step, what we did was, see, we explored everything. If we can delay the taxation, we can delay the dividends, we can delay the payables, we can discount our receivables. We looked at everything. And in the end, what we did was, there have been certain trainings to finance staff to be the right hand to the project managers in terms of working capital management. So what they would do, as Princey said, they would simply tell the people that these payables we have to extend by 60 days. So please renegotiate with the suppliers, or please go to the customer and ask for discounting of these receivables, or issue an LC against certain receivables so that we can discount. So instead of overwhelming the non-finance people with financial information, we broke everything into certain tasks to be performed by the people. And they were coordinating with somebody who had a good knowledge of finance, so that everything, whatever reaches to them, is crystallized into a non-financial understandable form for them. And they would focus on the task, get it done. And here we are to gather all the puzzles and make the bigger picture. This is how we managed here.
It's interesting what you both say, because I mean, I think this is true of almost all finance professionals. Yeah, that there is a danger of kind of being in that island, yeah, of finance that's kind of somehow detached from the business. And personally, I always encourage people, go on a factory tour, go to a site, See what people actually do, what they really care about, the things that make them anxious when it doesn't work for some reason and all that. Because it then, from a finance or treasury perspective, it then gives you a much better perspective on, as you say, Osman, you're just looking cash flows in, cash flows out. So what's really important and what really isn't. Yeah, it's more than a numbers game in that respect, isn't it? Yeah. But at the same time, the challenge, particularly we have at the moment, is that I know I haven't traveled anywhere in 18 months, nowhere at all. Yeah.
Yes.
So particularly with many operations across the Middle East, I mean, people are spread out across a very wide geographic area. Yeah. So it's not always easy to say, oh yes, I'll pop down to such and such a crew who are maybe only just 20 kilometers down the road. Yeah. It's not so simple at the moment, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
But hopefully that will change. Thank you very much, guys. I'm conscious of time. I think that's been very interesting. I think probably in summary, it's probably worth saying that working capital is one of those moving target subjects. So once you think it's solved, something else pops up and you have to fix that again. Yeah, because the world changes and circumstances are changing. Just like the pandemic, just like localization, et cetera, et cetera. And, who knows what's coming next? That's the unknowable for everybody, isn't it? But thank you very much, guys, for the discussion. Now, just to a few other housekeeping points, just to remind you that this session is recorded. It is available for the next 14 days after the summit. If there is a discussion zone that you can use within the summit as well, and there's also a virtual exhibition. So please engage, and there's a speaker survey as well. Please do use that, because we try to make these things better as we go on. But thank you very much for today. Thank you, Princey. Thank you, Osman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.